Where to begin? My childhood is mostly a blur. I've never had the best memory, and my childhood was also pretty uneventful, so there isn't too much for me to remember anyway. At least, that's what I thought. And then, about a week ago, I remembered him. He was a spindly man with limbs so thin they looked brittle, as if they would break if bent the wrong way. But he could twist them in all sorts of unnatural directions. And his face, it was gaunt, with his cheeks sunk deep into his skull, but he was always smiling. Always. He had a red dot painted onto each of his sunken cheeks, a little similar to a clown. And then there were his eyes.
Now, I remember the day I saw him. I remember every detail, which is rare for me. I was 6, and my parents were taking me into my grandmother's house. She lived fairly close, but it had been several months since I had last seen her. It was dusk, I remember. And we were going for dinner like most grandmothers. Mine was an excellent cook, so I was looking forward to it. We arrived, and after the usual comments about how tall I was getting, we had dinner. I don't remember what it was, just that it was delicious. I scarfed it down within a couple minutes as usual. The problem was that there wasn't much for a kid like me to do at Grandma's house once I had eaten. She smiled at me and told me to check the closet in the guest bedroom, where she had stored all the toys from when my dad and his siblings were kids. I was curious to see what toys my dad had grown up with, so I did. Grandma apparently didn't have guests spend the night often, because the guest room was almost totally empty. Like, there wasn't even a bed. There was an old wooden chair sitting in the corner and a blank picture frame hanging on the chipped walls. The floor was dusty, and it seemed like Grandma didn't go in that room often. The closet door was set in the far corner of the room, and I walked across it and opened the door. My little hand was just big enough to turn the doorknob, and inside, a collection of ancient-looking coats hung, obscuring the back of the closet. But I was more interested in the cardboard boxes sitting on the floor, each of which sported the word toys scrawled on the sides in Sharpie. I pulled one out and opened it. Inside was a fascinating collection of old playthings, yo-yos, army men, and even a couple battered action figures. I was examining one of those when I heard movement from inside the closet. The sound of shuffling, and then a soft thump. "Who's there?" I asked. No response. "Who's there?" I demanded again. A voice said from inside the closet,
"Nobody's here."
"That's not true. You're here," I said. For some reason, my stupid 6-year-old self wasn't scared, just curious and a little fascinated.
"So I am,"
the voice said. It sounded old, but freakishly happy at the same time.
"Just ignore me."
Why don't you come out?" I asked.
"Because I'll scare you. I'm scary looking. And if I come out, you'll scream."
I promise I won't scream. Will you come out now?"
Maybe.
A moment later, a hand poked out from behind the coats. It was so bony, it could have been skeletal if it weren't for the thin layer of skin stretched tightly over it. A second hand followed it, equally withered, and the two hands parted the coats, revealing a face. That gaunt face with the wide smile and painted dots on the cheeks. His eyes were closed, but I knew somehow that he could see me. And for some reason, I wasn't afraid of him. I think I was just too young and stupid to realize how weird this whole thing was, but true to my word, I didn't scream. He began to crawl out of the closet on all fours and sat down in front of me.
Hiya,
He said.
you're a cute little fella, huh?
I guess so, I said. Why do you look so funny?
I don't know. I've never seen what I look like before. I think I'm scary looking because whenever someone else sees me, they scream. Except you. You don't scream.
I don't think you're scary, I said. Just a bit weird. He mused to himself. What's your name? I asked him.
I don't know. I don't have a name. I don't really want one either.
Oh. I didn't understand why he wouldn't want a name. I was about to ask him what I was supposed to call him if he didn't have a name, but I didn't. I don't know why.
So, do you want to play with me?
He asked.
I know some fun tricks.
Well, what tricks can you do? I asked. He stood up and made his way across the room to the old chair. He grabbed the top with one hand and hoisted himself up off the ground, almost like an acrobat. And then he began to twist and turn. His limbs were bending in all the wrong ways, but I couldn't stop watching him. He twirled upside down, twisting all of his joints. After about 5 minutes, he finally lowered himself down and slowly crawled back over to me.
How's that for a trick?
He asked. That was amazing, I said. And it had been. I had never seen anything move like that before.
Glad to hear it.
He said.
Oh, say, why don't we go over and play in my closet? We can have even more fun in there.
I looked over at the closet, and it was dark, and a little spooky. I wasn't sure I wanted to go inside it. I don't know about that, I said. I think maybe I should go now.
No, don't go.
He said.
Stay with me, and we can have fun forever and ever. Come on.
I don't want to, I said. I want to go.
Please?
No! And then his smile, which had remained fixed on his face the whole time, drooped a little bit.
Get in the closet,
He said, though his voice was different now and carried a sharp, bladed edge.
It'll be fun, I swear.
I'm not going in the closet. You're starting to scare me.
Am I? Sorry. If you come with me, I promise I won't scare you anymore.
His smile faltered even more. No, I'm not going in the closet. I'm leaving, I said. Then I stood up and took a step toward the door. And what was left of his smile twisted, morphing until it was a hideous frown. His teeth were sharp, triangular points. How I had not noticed that before, I don't know. Goosebumps were running along my arms and legs, and suddenly I knew I needed to get out of there. but I didn't. I tried to move, but found I was paralyzed. And then his eyes, which had remained closed the entire time, slid open. I screamed. They weren't eyes, they were voids. Wide, empty gaps that were filled only with darkness. And even as I screamed, I couldn't look away from them. They called to me somehow, and I knew that if I didn't get out, I would be lost in them forever. He rushed at me then, his spindly arms surging forward, reaching out to grab me. His frowning mouth opening so wide I could have fit my head into it with room to spare. That was what broke me out of my trance. I ran for the door as fast as my little legs would carry me, his clawed hands just centimeters away from grasping me. I flung the door open, and I could feel his claws running along my back as I bolted through it. I slammed the door shut, catching his hands between the door and the frame. I heard him screech from inside the room, and he yanked it back, letting the door shut properly. When I saw this, I kept running down the hall into the kitchen, and finally to the dining room where my parents and grandmother were still talking. I ran into my mother's lap and wrapped my arms around her, crying. They asked me what was wrong, and I told them about the thing I saw in the guest bedroom, but they didn't believe me. I remember my dad saying, "Quite the imagination, huh?" to my grandma and laughing about it. After we went home that night, I somehow forgot about the whole incident completely. I forgot about the guest bedroom, the strange being I'd met there, those horrific eyes, and all of it, I suppose. I grew up, finished school, moved out, and never thought about him. That is until a week ago. I was walking home from a local coffee shop one morning and happened to pass a skinny man with a very gaunt, pale face and sunken cheeks and eyes. Strange, I thought. He looks familiar. He looks like... And then I remembered everything. That memory has haunted me constantly for the past few days. I spend every spare moment thinking about it. I wondered what would have happened to me if I had gone into the closet with him like he'd asked. I wonder what he would have done to me if he had caught me. And I hoped that it was just a dream. Some crazy random nightmare I had somehow resurfaced when I saw that man on the street. That was the only remotely logical explanation I could come up with. Yesterday, curiosity got the better of me once again, and I went back to my grandmother's house. She died almost 5 years ago, but I was hoping I could talk to whoever was living there currently. I had to see that room again. I had to know. The current resident of the house was a woman in her late 20s. She had looked very confused when I first knocked on her door, but I explained that my grandmother used to live there in this house, and that there was something I wanted to check on. She agreed to let me look and even offered me some snacks, which I declined. She had told me she converted the guest bedroom into an art studio where she painted, but that she'd barely touched the closet at all, apart from getting rid of the boxes and jackets. When I stepped inside it, however, I was surprised to see a piece of wood lying on the floor of the otherwise empty closet. I knelt down to pick it up and saw that it was inscribed with the phrase, "Nobody's here." A chorus of chills ran down my back at the familiar words, and I turned over the wood, wondering if there was more writing on the other side. There was. It said,
"You weren't dreaming,